Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Teaching Tax Flow podcast. Today, episode 140. We have a great guest joining us who's going to help us decipher and decode the BRRRR method when it comes to real estate investing. So before we get into that topic with our guest, let's take a brief moment and thank our episode sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by Wealth Builders Mortgage Group, powered by Movement Mortgage, one of the top mortgage teams in the nation and a powerhouse in the real estate investing world. With over $1.1 billion in closed mortgage volume and more than 3,000 investor deals under their belt, they don't just talk the talk, they walk it. Their team specializes in helping short-term and long-term rental investors scale smart with customized lending strategies. They offer all STR loan products, including second home, investment, non-QM, bank statement, asset-based, and HELOCs. They also offer all primary home loan products too. Whether you're just starting out or expanding an existing portfolio, their unique Path of 10 strategy is designed to help you move from a 9-to-5 job to financial independence. If you're looking for a lending partner who truly understands the investor mindset, visit wealthbuildersmortgagegroup.com and start building your roadmap today.
Somebody is missing from the episode at this current time. He will join us shortly. However, he's not here right now. And why I bring that up, right? Timing is everything. Literally with everything. If we're talking taxes, finance, planning, real estate investing, driving to the grocery store, dropping your kid off at daycare, picking your kid up from daycare is a whole nother story about being on time. But Chris Picuro is missing in action at this very moment. So we brought in somebody else who was planned anyways, but here he is. So Jim Ingersoll from Dealmaker. So I'm going to let Jim tell us his story a little bit. Not only how he got to where he is now, but frankly, why he's here, but also all the amazing things that Dealmaker and that community are up to and why we are bringing him in to talk about the BRRRR method. Now, we're also not talking about winter months in Michigan, because yes, that's BRRRR, but this is completely different. Jim, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing today, bud?
I am doing good. It's not Burr here in Virginia today. It's pretty warm. It's going to be around 80 and beautifully sunny weather. I love it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, you say it's beautifully and sunny there too. You know, in Michigan, I think it's like 80 something today. So if anybody's watching this and not just listening to it on Spotify or wherever, I have this like gleaming sun shining in because it's not always sunny here outside of Ann Arbor, but I have this little sliver that's just coming in at me that I can't block. So Jim, so me and you and Chris, we met not too long ago, or I met you not too long ago at your event in March, literally not too long ago. And y'all's community really impacted me a little bit. Again, I know we've talked about this, going to so many events, just the makeup of the individuals there. And I'll let you talk about, you know, really the type of individuals that go to that. But it went so much further than just, hey, this is how you make money. Because you can go to a 1,000 real estate conferences and that's their thing, right? You're there to make money. Let's make this as profitable as it possibly can. I feel like you always hear that, and then you always hear well, it's not a get rich quick deal, but you guys offered so much more to it. But then, you know, thinking of the BRRRR method here, and I won't give the definition of it. I love saying it because I always get my tongue tied around it, and I'll let you get into that. But like, tell us a little bit again about how you got into this, because you have a great story about your community, and then really, you know, what would you guys do? Like what Dealmaker is all about, and then we'll talk about BRRRR.
Okay. Well, I left corporate America almost 20 years ago now. It's been a really long time. And at that point, I was running 2 factories. And when I was told we had to close everything down, corporate came and said, that's it. I had to lay everybody off. And I thought, this whole corporate thing is way overrated. Like, it's fun growing a business. It sucks to lay everybody off. And I said, that's it. I'm never going back no matter what. So I began jumping back into real estate. Our initial real estate venture, my wife and I started in our early 20s, didn't go well. So she made a statement like, I'm never going to be a landlord again. That cost me about 10 years of investing. And but when we came back in, you know, I learned to invest in myself and get some help and training and mentorship and build systems and processes and networks, and everything started to click when I came back the second time. And from there, the rest is history. We just started wholesaling and we started flipping a bit. And then along the way, started to rent. I was sort of doing BRRRR before BRRRR was a thing. That term didn't exist like 15 years ago, really. But neither did Facebook, YouTube, or podcasts. So
That's
a lot
true.
has changed.
And it's probably really, I mean, I'm sure you had that moment, you're like, "Wait a minute, they just gave an acronym to
Yeah,
something that I've been doing this whole time." And it's
exactly right. A whole
kinda
bunch of
crazy
us.
looking. So,
Yeah,
like, you probably
yeah.
think of it, you're like, "I'm not gonna call it Burr. I'm gonna call it my own methodology and my own process for doing this."
There you
But
go.
that's how it goes.
There you
But,
go. And so we started to buy and hold, and that sort of changed everything. We started maybe 10 or so years ago, started doing some live events, and that morphed into Dealmaker. That first event we had maybe 30 people at. It was a weekend on. I taught people how to flip houses, and from there it's grown. You know, you were a Dealmaker a couple months ago. We had 350 investors there, and like you said, there's a very diverse group. They're from all over the country. We have people doing mobile homes. We have people buying retail centers. We have people building new construction, doing all of these different things, and they all collaborate. And there's no competition, and everybody helps each other. And that rising tide, we all get better, including myself. I walk away from Dealmaker inspired. Like I am ready to invest hardcore when I leave my own Dealmaker because
mm,
everybody inspires me. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And so that's sort of the Dealmaker way. And we really focus heavy on epic networking and intentional connection and relationship building. But a lot of people that come don't realize they're also going to get a much better mindset. And I'm sure you experienced that as well, because we all experience that mindset shift where we start to believe that we can do it. And I've seen so many people sort of get their start. And then over a few years, all of a sudden they become a millionaire and their life financially changed. But it also allows them to live a little differently, give a little bit better, and really live a life of impact. That's why we like working with organizations like Share the Love, where
Right.
I was just in Guatemala a few weeks ago giving away wheelchairs. So that's a 10,000-foot view of my story in Dealmaker.
No, that's perfect, and really, why I thought that was so important too to just kinda talk about what you guys have built community-wise, right, is I think as we bring Burr into this, so if anybody's not familiar with Burr, let's give it a whirl. I'm gonna try not to twist my tongue up here. So it's buy, rehab, rent, repeat. Wait,
You
rent,
forgot refi.
refinance, repeat. There you go. I got
Yep.
close to the
So
end. I
that's
got
Burr. Yep,
85%
you
there.
got it.
So,
So
and why I think that's so cool, how it really merges into this conversation, what you guys have done, right? Is am I wrong in saying that's, and a lot of times that's a great kickoff point for
it
somebody
is.
really trying to get into real estate investing, right?
It is. I think they've got the letters in reverse order though, because I think you should always start with your refi. Um, and then like build it backwards. Of course, I used to be an engineer, so I like to reverse engineer anyways. But if you start with the end in mind, which is your like permanent financing for a while, then you can build the deal to match that permanent financing and make it all work. It's a lot more challenging now with rates, in the sevens than it was in the fours.
Mm,
So coming in and, we always had the goal of doing Burr with little or no money out of our own pocket. And that's how I got started. I didn't have much money when I started. And so I started buying and holding. And one of the biggest goals was to not use my own money. And so that was a lot easier with rates of 4.5 than at 7.5. But, it ties back into if you've got some rentals, maybe you want to do a 1031 and use your equity as a down payment on something bigger. And you can do Burr that way these days pretty easily as well.
absolutely. And really I think it's a game. My personal view, I would say it's a game, but it really is. It's kind of picking and pulling which resources you have and not just financial resources, right? We're
Right.
talking like people in communities like yourself, just coming up with ideas and creative ways to go about things. I think, over the past couple years, the three things stick out to me the most of, little nuggets, if we will, I think that I've learned from people just kind of through osmosis, right? The OPM, so other people's money, obviously, Burr, which we're talking about here, and then really just capitalizing on the knowledge of everybody else. So even though it's not really an acronym for that, but people in the real estate investing world, I would say, are probably, at least from what I've experienced, the most willing group of individuals to help each other out. And even if they're in the same market, which is incredible to me, like that is awesome to see because, in some, say you're at we'll just say a small business conference, right? You might have somebody from Detroit and somebody from Detroit right there. And, they're not going to share everything because they're, kind of going after the same clientele. But in the REI world, I mean, they would say, all right, let's go into a deal together. Let's literally do it together. Or, hey, there's a property next to mine or something. And I love seeing that. So even just from, a tax advantage standpoint in real estate investing, right? Your opinion on that and maybe your advice for anybody. How has that really impacted you as an individual, but then other individuals too, where they say, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was all these tax advantages, or I just got in this to make money. And you're telling me that I'm going to actually have to cut less of a check to the IRS because now I'm involved in this. And is that something you've seen a lot?
Yeah, I mean, the depreciation becomes very real in April, doesn't it? Every year. I mean, it's amazing. Now they're talking about bringing back 100%, bonus. I mean, that is going to be a game changer for all of us. They bring that back and the big, beautiful bill gets passed. I mean, it's going to be game on. There's a lot of stuff in there that's going to change. So it is good and it is very real. I think when I was working corporate America myself, I didn't realize that being an employee is the highest tax you're going to pay. Like I got out of corporate America and my taxes dropped. And then as I built a rental portfolio, they dropped more. But keep in mind though, like when you sell your worst rentals, you're going to pay that depreciation recapture. And that's where you want to learn from folks like you and Chris all about like 1031s. And then you can like push it out in the future some more. And some people think, refi till you die. And don't worry about it. Just let it keep going. You can pull cash out, completely cash free, tax free, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
A refi cash out you don't pay any tax on that. It's amazing when you think about it. What an incredible gift to all of us that like to be landlords. And you touched on two really important things too. You talked about OPM and then people helping people, and it's so true. That OPM really all comes back to like I classify it as relational capital, because you're going to build relationships with people that can help you fund your deals with OPM. I love that. And then you talked about learning, and that's really the intellectual capital. And we do have to have like a foundation of knowing how to do deals and doing BRRRR and doing flips or whatever it is. So I'm glad you
Right.
brought those up as well.
Absolutely. And I look at, the Burr method specifically is it's definitely not a standalone. Like this is not just one
No,
tool that
not
just
cookie
sits on an
cutter.
island,
No.
right? Like everything's different. There's a million different ways to do this. And maybe if you can think of a couple examples, even, multiple, I'll let you pick. Maybe walk us through some of the
Yeah.
experiences you've had or have heard about just through Burr. Again, just thinking if somebody came to this, they had no idea what they're listening or watching,
Okay.
and now all of a sudden they're here and we're not talking about snow falling in June
Well, let
from
me
the
take
Michigan
like 3
sky.
minutes and I'll define what it is. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
so I said start with the end in mind. You always, Covey was right. Always do everything with the end in mind. If you're looking for financial freedom, know what that looks like. If you're looking to buy and hold rental property, know what that permanent financing is. So I always say start there, call a local bank, start to understand what it takes for you to be bankable, number one. And you can do commercial loans, you can do DSCR loans. They're asset based more than your personal base, which is easier. They're going to lend on the collateral more than on you personally. Not saying like you don't need a good credit score, because you do. And I'm not saying you don't need cash reserves, because, that's your safety net. But once you get past those two hurdles, the rest of it is based on the property. So you want to have like a loan to value of like 75% or less. So you got to buy right. And then you got to know what your rental cash flow is so you can hit the DSCR which is basically a cash flow calculation. So call a couple local banks, do it today, and find out what their commercial lending guidelines are, or call a DSCR lender. Once you sort of understand those guidelines, you could put together your buy criteria. Some people call it a buy box, but it's really your investment criteria. And that really should meet the end goal of your refi. So you've got to know like how much equity you need, how much rental cash flow you need. And when rates were low, like 4.5%, we would say the 1% rule is good napkin math. And the way that worked was pretty easy. If you bought a $200,000 property, you'd want at least 1% of that in rental income, $2,000 a month. And if you hit that, you are confident you can get into that end financing. Well, with rates up, you need a little stronger cash flow than that. So if you paid $200,000 for a single family home in Ann Arbor, beautiful, historic Michigan,
Which
Chris,
Jim's saying that because Chris usually likes to throw that in, that he's in beautiful, historic Franklin, Tennessee. So
I
that's a
love
dig.
beautiful, historic Franklin, Tennessee. Every time I visit, I go to Merides. We walk around. My wife does a little shopping. I do love it. But
It is great.
so if you're in those areas, and you pay $200,000 for a house in Ann Arbor, you're gonna probably want closer to $2,500 a month in rental income in order to get into that financing with as little money out of your own pocket as possible. Once you define that investment criteria, like where you want to invest, whether it's single family, duplex, quad, whatever it is, you know what the rental income needs to be in the equity, then you can begin analyzing deals to see if they'll fit that box. Okay. And then you can buy it. You can buy it with a short-term loan. We call that OPM. You mentioned it earlier, other people's money. It could be OPI, other people's IRAs, by the way, because if you borrow from somebody in a Roth and they do a private money loan to you, all of that is tax-free. I love lending onto my Roth, so I mentioned that. So that would be like a 6-month loan. And then that gives you time to rehab it, which is fix it up, make the kitchen look good, get a good roof, HVAC, windows, whatever you're doing. Then you rent it. That's pretty easy. Get a property manager if you need help, or do it yourself and save some money and get those skills and processes in. And then you rebuy it and then you repeat. That's Burr.
Just churn and burn. And it's very interesting to me too, because again, I learned about what Burr was a little bit before I actually remembered that there's a very long acronym for it. And the more I kind of took that, I think me and Chris and our team may have been down in Orlando for an event maybe 3 years ago, and that might have been my first exposure to it. But then coming back home, it was very interesting because I have a lot of friends that are contractors, home builders, a lot of these guys, and they'll flip a couple properties here and there. Sometimes they'll be in it for the long game. And then I started telling about it. They're like, "No, I don't know what that is. Like, what do
Right.
you mean? Like, wow, it's a crazy concept." And I wasn't in a position to say like, "Oh, let me tell you all about it," because I just learned about it 72 hours
Yeah.
ago. So, it's not a good thing. But then just thinking about how that works, right? Like for a specific individual, and let me go back to when you mentioned the buy box. I think that is if anybody wants to call it whatever they want to, I think that is a great piece of advice for anybody, because I see that as a tool that really takes a lot of the emotion out of things, right?
Yeah.
Because
That's a good
you
point.
may see a property that goes up and you're like, wow, that's a screaming deal. I love it. Well, whether you love it or not doesn't mean it's going to make you any money. And if it doesn't make you any
Right.
money, you're going to come to totally despise this thing because it's going to be a negative funnel on your bank account. So I like that kind of setting the perimeter. And if it falls within it and meets your own criteria, nobody else is necessarily at that point, right? Because if it works for you, then you can kind of figure out what resources you need to make happen. But just that process, and I mentioned contractors, it's awesome for those guys because they come in and, if they have
Right.
downtime or they plan for it, and think about how much money they save in the rehab, right? Like that
Right.
takes out a lot of the extremes. I actually grabbed lunch with a buddy of mine, probably about 3-4 months ago, and I think he had bought a quad. I believe it was in downtown Detroit. Got a really good deal on it. I think I could be making this up, but I think he said something about He had bought it at auction because a couple of the other deals before that on that property had fallen through. He comes in and has the
Mm-hmm.
manpower, to make it happen, because I think it was a fire is what the situation
Mm.
was. But right, if it wasn't a contractor doing it, it's no longer really a deal for somebody. They may be, over investing in
It's
this
true.
thing just to make it rentable. And here's another question for you too that I know somebody spoke about. I don't know if it was on stage at y'all's last event or if it was the hallway conversations, which are just as good as
They
what's
are.
on stage. Is I feel like somebody was talking about Burr and Section 8, that they were trying to get into that. Is that a good, not is it a good thing? I mean, I love the purpose of it, obviously, but
Hmm.
is it a lot harder to do for any
Now,
reason in that, or is that
it's
a good starting point maybe for somebody getting into it, or maybe not?
I like using Section 8 when the economy sort of crashes a bit, like it did in 2007. But I have a lot of friends that do Section 8 and they do really well. The nice thing is you get paid every month by the government. But the truth is, like, if you create a really good rental property, you're going to attract great tenants anyways. And you will get paid every month, even if you don't rely on the government. I'll give you an example. Like, I just rented last week a 2-bedroom apartment in Richmond, and I put it onto Zillow, and I got flooded. I had like 40 people that inquired about it. And I started looking through the applications coming in, and there's at least 4 or 5 of them that qualify to buy houses that are renting. They
Mhm.
have 4 to 5x the monthly rent. They have good credit scores like 770 and up. I mean, these are great people. So Section 8 is good, especially if you're in property like in not the best areas necessarily. But it can be good. But I like it when economies crash. Like say AI gets crazy and unemployment jacks up in 5 years and we have a lot of bankruptcies or whatever happens. Those government checks on rent will keep coming in even if your employees aren't working. So that's kind of the balance side of it.
Right. And with kind of marrying Burr with that a little bit, it it probably works with that pretty well,
It does.
right? I mean, and maybe even taking a step back, doing that probably is an entry point to somebody into the world,
Mhm.
and then getting into Section 8 to start with. Do you see that maybe as a
I mean, it
not
can be.
so
I think
good?
it's okay, but I would encourage people to do non-Section 8 as well. I don't think it really matters. I think it's the quality of tenant's a little bit different. If you're able to create a product that's really good and attract those tenants that are really good that could potentially buy, but they want to rent for a while, which there's lots of them right now. They're easy to manage as well. You don't, I mean, I've had crazy stories both ways, but I've definitely had some crazy Section 8 stories.
I can imagine, like, what things, the neurons that fire off in your head when you're like, "Oh, well, tell me an example of A." You're probably like, "Oh my gosh, I have a
Right.
Rolodex of people I could call about every
Yeah.
situation." We have every example of it.
I haven't
I
had
have
any issues as a landlord in at least like 5 years, like zero evictions and no drama, no problems.
That's
But
awesome.
before that, like when I was first learning, like I really struggled for a while. I'd have tenants tear places up, not pay rent, create these crazy drama stories. But over time, I've put the pieces together to figure that out, and I don't miss it.
Right? You're like, "Hey, somebody else can have those headaches,"
Yeah,
specifically.
those are
So
people I like to buy from. They're called burned out landlords. One of my favorite people to buy from. When I meet a landlord, a lot of times I'll say, "Why don't you sell me your worst 2 or 3 properties?" And they're like, "I would love to do that."
right. It's almost like thinking of it as a distressed property,
Mhm.
but in the landlord's hands. Like, it's
Yeah,
an emotionally distressed investment property.
yeah, I love buying from landlords. I understand landlords, and I understand their problems because I was there. Just I
Right,
overcame them and made it work.
right,
So I
and
can
helping them
solve
get them
those
off their
problems.
portfolio, you're helping
Yeah,
them out, right? So,
right.
they're happy. So, as we kinda wrap this up a little bit, I know because we can talk
Yeah,
on, we can take this burr and take it in 100 different directions,
sure.
right, and how it's applicable. Um, I would say anybody that's listening or watching this, obviously reach out to us, reach out to anybody in your network with any questions, but definitely, definitely, I cannot say it enough. I could sit here and say definitely for 5 minutes. Check out Dealmaker. That community is incredible. And the other good thing about that is the questions I think that I've posted in y'all's groups, you get a lot of great responses. It never falls on
Well,
deaf
we are a
ears.
tax advantaged group. We love discussions on depreciation, 1031s. We're a huge user of self-directed IRAs. So like we want to use all of the arsenal of taxes. That's why we love having you as part of our community, because like you guys you can pour into us and help us learn
Mhm.
even more things to be doing, whether it's, you know, um, cost segregation or a 1031 or self-directed IRAs. Why
Right.
not? I posted this in the group this week. I don't know if you saw it, but it said a lot of people think of their Roth as a retirement account. But I said, why don't we think about it differently and think about it as a wealth building machine?
Mm,
Tax-free forever is the best gift our government's ever given us. And if you self-direct that baby, you can really fire it up. I mean, I'm doing private money lending on wraps and earning 30%.
mhm. Which is
So,
very
knowing the
hard to
rule
get
of
elsewhere.
72, that money's doubling every 2 to 3 years. So just shift your mind from like, yeah, it's a retirement account, but like, how could I invest it tax free?
Absolutely. And two, so I know we spoke on it a little bit too as we kind of come to a close here too, but anybody that is looking to get into this, and this could be a Burr topic, it could be just in general. If somebody met you in an airport and say, "Hey, what do you do? What do you do?" You told them briefly what you do, the microness of everything you have experience-wise. Um, and they said, "Hey, I would love to get into that." And maybe somebody that's not all in saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this. I really want to do this." They said, "Hey, I've been thinking about it." What would you tell them if you had a couple minutes, sitting at an airport waiting on a
Well, I think
delayed
it's
flight or
good to get
something?
into a community where you can learn. I mean, check out elitedealmakers.com, come to our Dealmaker Facebook group, or join me in Inner Circle. I've got a $97 a month easy entry point. I'd love to have you on and talk about taxes, by the way. And
Yeah. Well, you want Chris,
it's
though. Trust me, you don't want me. I'm just the marketing
yeah,
guy.
I like
I'll
hanging
I'll
out with you.
hey, I'll come hang out.
rehabvaluator.com/inner-circle, $97 a month is the easiest, cheapest, best group you can find anywhere.
Awesome. Awesome. And obviously getting into the world of real estate investing, you'll make some mistakes, whether you realize them or not. From day one, they might
Forever.
come up and bite you in the rear, but you learn from them. And I would say, I got into it in the Airbnb game completely on accident. This was, oh man, 15 years ago? No, more
Wow.
than that even. Wow. Yeah, I listed a condo in downtown Charleston, lived in it for 3 months, and then had to come back to Michigan for a month, put it on Airbnb, no photos, nothing. I'm like, "I don't even know what this platform is," but somebody told me I should, and then I started getting listings. So my problem there was, how do I turn it
Yeah.
between guests? Because 'Cause I'm not there, so that's a
Mhm.
whole 'nother story with
All right,
that
so I
one.
got a gift for your guests if they want, because you
Yeah.
mentioned Airbnb. I've been doing a lot with AI. I mean, it's crazy how much stuff I'm doing. And I've created one for wrap lending, and I've created some GPTs for Airbnb to write the listing description persuasively to fill your occupancy. And if your guests want it, they have to email me. I don't have a landing page or anything, but it's called Rental Pro GPT. I'll give it away for free because it'll help you write better listings. You can just email me, jim@elitedealmakers.com, and I'll sign you up for it.
Perfect, and we'll go ahead and put that in the show notes too,
All right.
so like I always say, people, do not get lazy. We are giving you something here. There's
Listen,
resources. Whether
it's
you're
a
listening to
great
this, watching
podcast.
it,
Look at how
look
many
at
shows now?
140.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that wild to think about? Even if these
Yes.
were 30 minutes, which we average right around there,
Yeah,
that's a lot of hours
I
just in
agree.
talking, not even the editing part of this, right? Like
Right.
just the amount of resources we pull together. And really, frankly, Jim, why I love doing these is I really enjoy not knowing a 100th of what Chris knows in the
Yeah.
tax world, but then
Yeah.
having these discussions with people like yourself where, you know, I'm constantly learning with this, and I feel like I can bring a very unique perspective. Me and Chris talk about all the time is, I look at this in some of the content we put out, how we put it out, how we structure it, the people we talk to is, if I didn't know everything on either side of the fence, which I don't, how can we merge them together? Because even like
Right.
you mentioned, even people that are in y'all's community, they might be doing this, have been doing it for 40 years, but they still come to the events. They still talk to these people because even if they don't learn verbatim from somebody else, it's the mindset, right? And that might trigger just a different way of doing things, which it's awesome that you brought that up because I think in 5 episodes from now, we have a one strictly on mindset. So
Oh, I
it
love it.
rolls into it
One of my
perfect.
favorite topics. Love it.
Curtis McCollum, great guy. We had a
Love it.
fantastic conversation with him. But Jim, I can't thank you enough, man. Thank you for
Great
taking
to
the
hang out
time.
with you, coming from
Absolutely.
beautiful, historic Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Love it, man. I love it that we dropped in there multiple times. And for everybody also that is an avid listener of this podcast, there's something else that will not be mentioned in this one because Chris is not here. It is a sport that used to be referred to, haven't heard it as much now, as geriatric tennis. So we're not going to say what sport that is because I can't do that. It has to come from him. So we'll leave it at that. Jim, thank you again so much, man. We'll drop your contact in those show notes. People can download that resource for their Airbnb descriptions. Again, do not be lazy. You got a free podcast. You just got a free 30 minutes with this gentleman here. I know you didn't get any info from me, and I'm okay with that. He's the knowledge base here. So click on that, share it. Even if it's not for you, share with somebody you know and kind of just take it. Even if you have your descriptions written for Airbnb, I'd say put them in that, right, Jim? And just kind of give it a little refresh
It'll
and
help
see
you.
what it
It'll
does.
boost.
Awesome. Well, sir, thank you. We're going to see you soon at one of your events. And for everybody here, we will see you back here again on the Teaching Tax Flow podcast next week. Different time, roughly. Completely different topic. Have a great week, everybody.
The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.